All right, folks. I love seeing all those friendly faces bopping along to the intro music. That's right. It's time for another week of the Rec Poker Podcast. I'm your host, Jim Reid, Bluffsterini in the home game, and at Rec Poker Jim on the hellscape we call Twitter. And I have the best freaking job in the world, talking poker with my friends here on the Strategy Forums edition of the podcast every Monday night while we steal each other's chips in the free nightly home game. Now, I'll mention that we are brought to you by Running Aces. They are the official sponsor of the Rec Poker Podcast. Located less than an hour north of the Twin Cities in the beautiful state of Minnesota, you can find out more about them at runaces.com. Now, most of what we do here is free. We're a largely volunteer based organization, so we really depend on support from our sponsors and from our premium members who sign up to take part in our training material and study opportunities for only $22 a month. Now, you can always get a free account. Everything starts with a free account to our community here at rec.poker. All you need to join is an email address and a smile, but we do insist on both. And if you want to go take your game to the next level, I encourage you to join our premium membership. You can always get your first month for only $5 by using the code RecPoker at checkout. And if you don't have $5, man, I get it. It's a tough time in the world right now. That's why we like to support a local food bank, and we like to encourage you to support local food banks as well. So if you'd like to get a free month of premium membership at Rec Poker at any time, just make a donation to your local food bank of any amount. Send us a screenshot, proof of payment, proof of donation, and we'll happily set you up with a free month of premium membership at Rec Poker, just as a way of saying thanks for helping out your fellow human. Now, you get used to hearing my voice because they let me host the show on Monday, those suckers. But I am only one man. It takes a group, a gang, a crew to make all the magic happen around here. We call this group of wizards the Wrecking Crew. And if you want to learn more about me or the rest of the crew, you go to rec.poker/crew, or you can just listen up. You're going to meet a few of them right here on the air, starting with producing co-host Chris Jones.
I'm Chris Jones. You can find me 5B5 on Twitter or Blue Sky, and you can find me as 5x5 in the Poker Stars home game, and I help run our monthly strategy segment called the Deep Dive.
I'm Kim Kilroy. I'm PetVet33. I'm 3056 in the home game, and I run a hand history review group once a month on the second Wednesday.
I'm Rob Gardner. I go by at Rob Gardner Live on Twitter, and I get to help with all of the marketing and making Jim's peanut butter and jelly sandwiches.
And I'm Rob Washam. You can find me as Radman50 just about everywhere. And on the first and third Wednesdays of every month, you can join Rob's book study as me and a bunch of premium members go over the latest books.
And I'm Taylor Maas. You can find me on Twitter at Taylor_Maas or as Gopher Boy TJM in the Rec Poker home game, which I stream live on Twitch on Wednesday evenings at 9 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Central.
So come get involved, folks. Join some of our Wrecking Crew members in the myriad activities that they put on week in and week out. It all starts for free, but like I say, come give our premium membership a chance. You'll find some fantastic, fun folks to hang out with and to help bring your game to the next level. One of the free resources that we offer here at Rec Poker are our forums and our Discord channel. These are places that all you need to do is just sign up for an account here for free. You can post, you can get feedback on your hands, you can upload questions and charts, you can get all sorts of like group coaching opportunities, you can talk to other serious, thoughtful, fun, recreational poker players like us who all want to help each other get better. And like I say, it's all free. So here on the forums edition of the podcast, usually we take a post from our forums or from our Discord and talk about it here on the show. This is actually a conversation that was kind of started last week, looking at a hand that Fripper posted in the show notes, posted in the Discord that we talked about on the show. You don't have to have listened last week to get the conversation that we're going to have today, but I'd encourage you to go back and listen to it anyway, because we had a good conversation there. And now we're going to kind of highlight some of the more abstract strategic adjustments that people might make in similar situations. This is coming from a conversation that Chris and Taylor had offline. So I guess I'll throw it over to you guys first. So one and only Chris Jones, why don't you let us into the framework for what we're going to talk about here?
Yeah. So last week, just to really briefly review last week's episode, the crux of the question, I mean, there were multiple questions. I encourage you to listen to the whole episode, but the crux of the question came we were, as the player was holding a nut flush draw and had been check raised on the flop and then had a kind of a big overbet shove on the turn. And there we are. We have all this, equity and pretty nut flush draw. And what do we do? And I wanted to sort, and especially in the live environment, I think that's really crucial to sort of like think about this from a live perspective. So, to sort of like couch this conversation, first of all, I think it pains me, but I have to admit it. Uh, our own Taylor Maas has had like an amazing October of poker. Um, Rob Gardner runs our scoreboard, which sort of captures how's the community doing. And I feel like we need to parse out how's the community doing and how's Taylor doing, because Taylor's like responsible for about half of what the scoreboard is showing right now. It's been an incredible month. So first of all, congratulations, Taylor. That's really awesome. It's been fun to watch you take off here. I think you played the entire Fall Poker Classic, and I don't, did you cash every event?
I played 5 events during the Fall Poker Classic and cashed every single one of them.
I mean,
Oh,
my
man.
God. And by the way, played the mystery bounty event and won the biggest mystery bounty prize. So
Yeah.
uh
Yeah. So yeah, it was 2 final tables, 2 final 2 tables, and then a 10K mystery bounty in the one that I didn't get to the final 2 tables of.
Wow. And I will just point out rec.poker/coaching if you want to find out how you can also pull the biggest mystery bounty
right.
and final table 2 out of the 5 tournaments you play and have these kind of results. Taylor's one of the
Or
more gifted poker players in our group here, and
yeah.
he and Chris and Rob and Kim and Rob, and they've got both Robs in here, and myself and a few other Wrecking Crew members all do offer coaching to our membership, and I'd encourage folks to go check that out. The prices are very reasonable, and we can help a lot of recreational players with their game. And you can have the kind of results that Taylor Maas has been having recently. So seriously, congratulations, Taylor. It's great. And I know how hard you work on this stuff. It's wonderful to see it come to fruition like that. Congratulations.
Yeah. Or come watch him play on Wednesday nights for free on
That's
Twitch.
right.
That's true.
Like,
Yeah, cards up.
Twitch.tv/recpoker.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Check
talk
Um,
through everything.
But Taylor, one of the things I wanted to sort of couch this conversation and then open it up for sort of the group to talk about too. You had mentioned in sort of an offline conversation about this series, talking about a couple other hands that have been played, but you mentioned sort of a small sort of adjustment or strategy adjustment that you made sort of pretty recently, especially in the live space. And I'm wondering if you can just sort of like talk us through a little bit about kind of what that approach was, how much of an impact you felt that had on um, your runs. This was it just, you just were running hot all day, or do you feel like some of these strategy adjustments had some impact on some of the results that you found?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, it was positive variance, cards going in my favor, getting the good spots at the right times. Because like to not cash an event is as simple as getting kings versus aces and getting, dealt out of a tournament. And like that can happen at any point. But the one thing that like we were chatting a bit about, and I think what we kind of wanted to square this conversation around is kind of, essentially what I would call is like stepping away from the solver for a little bit. I think so much of my study previously had been like, what does the solver say? Oh, cool, I got into this, intricate spot. What does the solver say that I should do? Okay, the solver says I should call it off and like go with it. But listening to different coaching sessions, listening to different seminars and things out there, started to kind of shine a light in my mind of like, hey, like sometimes when you adjust what the solver is taking as an input, its output of what to do changes quite drastically. And that's what I've started to like lean into a little bit more. And ultimately, what it's kind of like led me to do is play a little bit more nitty in a lot of spots after I'm like mentally making adjustments for how I assume my opponents are playing in specific areas. Like I'm going to assume opponents don't 3-bet as much as they should and not with as many bluffs. They're not going to check raise me with quite the right frequency. They're not going to just pure bet big or, have balanced ranges, and just try and like think through some of those spots and make some adjustments, and use those adjustments to make myself feel relatively confident about making big folds or big calls or whatever it may be. Usually it's more big folds just because it's a little bit under bluffed in the live scene, but that's kind of some of the adjustments that I've been making recently.
And to go back to the question around this ace four hand, ace four of spades hand, we're holding the nut flush, and maybe just kind of this situation in general when we are in a live space where we feel like the field is potentially under bluffing, where the field is probably not taking really advanced balanced lines and finding weird 3-bets and all this sort of stuff. When we're facing one of these really big bets, um how well actually let's think about these big bets, and let's think about it in a more practical space. So I had a hand yesterday that was, and I'm going to change the hand slightly because I had top set on this hand, and I don't think there's any question you just go broke in this hand, but I'm going to just change it slightly. So we are about 40 big blinds effective in a kind of a more turbo-y $250 daily tournament that was following up the main event. And it is kind of getting close to the money. We're about 4 tables left. And they pay 15. I think they paid 15. So we're kind of in that kind of, it's similar to the hand that was submitted to us last week, where there's maybe like 32, 31 left. And we get dealt in the hand. I got dealt pocket aces, but in this hand, let's say we get dealt pocket jacks. And we open the pocket jacks, and it folds around, and the button calls and the big blind calls. Or let's just have it be the big blind calls. We can forget the button. So we got pocket jacks, big blind has called us, and flop comes let's 3. What am I doing? No, sorry. 4, 4, 6, 7. I have to change this hand slightly because it wasn't exactly what happened, because I think mine was just a cooler, but comes 4, 6, 7. And remember, we're like 40 big blinds effective, and we've got pocket jacks. We've got an overpair on this board. And Villain, who seems like a player who's sort of maybe fits the description of the kind we were talking about the last hand, sort of maybe not as well studied a player, not maybe as not really understanding in sort of the grounds of theory as well. Just open shoves, just open rips, kind of 35 big blinds into us. What are you doing?
Yeah, I mean it's a tough spot because we're trying to discern like what our opponent might be jamming with in that spot and like what their bluffs would be. Having an overpair feels really tough, but to bet so big, you really have to like consider what does our opponent likely have in this spot. So they're gonna have a lot of 2 pairs. They're gonna have potentially sets. They've got some straights, but then also a lot of like straight draws. So it's like trying to think through some of those spots. Like a solver is going to just snap call in this spot, right? With an over pair, like you're going to beat all their single pair combos, but you really have to look at your opponent and start to understand, does my opponent overbet jam with top pair here? And ultimately that's what my decision is going to come down to, because I've played a decent amount with people live over the past week or so that if they get any sort of pair or any sort of equity in these types of spots, they're going to send it. But then there's other people that aren't that way. They're going to only be sending it when they've got extreme value. So to me, it's going to come down to some of those types of reads.
Mm-hmm. But that, I think, even opening yourself up to that possibility is that idea of playing maybe a little nittier in these spots, because like I think when I'm in that situation, it's just like, well, I mean, they're just going to have they're going to have like 7-8 so often. They're going to have like ace 7 sometimes. They're just going to have a bunch of holdings that we just dominate here. But there are going to just be players who just have sets and straights and nothing else. And that's, or maybe some two pairs. And that's really where we have to start. But I think opening ourselves up to that possibility of even folding an overpair here is something that we need to really be able to do in some of these live fields.
So usually in those situations, not always, there's going to be outliers, but generally in those types of situations, if our opponent is bluffing at a frequency that's high enough that we can make a profitable call with that hand, they're bluffing such a wide part of their range that you'll find a better spot. Like they're going to keep going and keep going and keep going because they're the kind of maniac that just loves to go after those kind of pots. And so I don't mind being extremely cautious the first time. Like if I haven't seen someone take this kind of action, defaulting to extreme value, it just never seems wrong. Because if you're wrong, you'll get them in an orbit or two. Like they're waiting to throw their chips at you. And so generally those frequencies line up to where I'm very, very comfortable folding in those spots and knowing I'll find a better spot down the road if that's the type of player they really are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that. Is there? Oh, sorry, Taylor, please go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say because I think you can think of a lot of different examples, but like another one that I had in the Fall Poker Classic main event, it was relatively early in day one. I opened King Jack offsuit, got called by the small blind, not the big blind. The flop came king high, but with two spades. They checked, I bet. They called. The turn was a third spade, and they let into me relatively big. Like it's those types of spots that's like, okay, like, what is my opponent like saying and what do I think they might potentially have? And it didn't feel like they had a lot of like two pair king combos, didn't really feel like they had a single pair. It felt like it was very much a flush. And, facing a single bet on the turn, I just folded my top pair. And it feels so wrong when you look at solvers and when you go through those types of things. But it's like, there's a lot of times here where I'm drawing dead. And even though it feels like I have a good hand and I feel like I might be in a relatively good spot, what is my opponent telling me in this specific instance? And then I also have the prior information. I'd been at the table for a little bit and I heard them make a comment that they were thinking about playing Queen 8 suited under the gun after the flop came all of one suit. And it was that suit that the opponent was talking about. So I've got a little bit of information that they do prefer suited hands and they like that. And it's like, okay, that's enough for me to just go, hey, I'm going to deviate. I'm going to step away from the solver and I'm going to fold in this specific spot. I know I've got top pair and I know I've got top pair good kicker, but I think there's a good chance that I'm just drawing dead right now.
Rob
I think
Washington.
that's so good. That's so good, those folds. The reason I'm saying that is because so often, because we study on the solvers, we're always studying on the solvers. They're telling us all of these different hands, first of all, that the player has. But that's based on some fictional range that the player never plays. And then you look at it and you try to find all of those hands that he could be bluffing with. And that's all part of that range that he really doesn't have. So he doesn't really have that range. He doesn't really have all the hands you hope he has because you're hoping he has these hands that you can beat because according to the solvers, he should. Portion of the time that makes it a valid call. But in reality, that's not what people are doing. And I think that's so important for us as we discuss strategy, we discuss, GTO solvers and the solvers outputs and how you should play these different hands. It's so important to do what Taylor just said. I mean, you have to understand that player doesn't have that GTO range. He doesn't have that GTO thought that, oh, this is my entire range. First of all, he doesn't know what his entire range is. He knows what his two cards are. and he doesn't know how he would play his entire range on that flop. He just knows that he has these two cards, and this is what he's going to do. So as we make sure we take that into consideration, especially in these big spots, especially live, we're going to be making profits, hopefully like Taylor did over the last week.
That's Rob Washington always keeping us grounded. And you're not playing against solvers, guys. You're playing against the people at the table you're playing against, and a lot of them are going to deviate pretty widely. There's going to be some node lock-in. Let me put it that way. At the table there. So I'm always reminded by one thing that Andrew Brokus said in our book study a couple years ago, which is when you're trying to decide how to play against players that deviate from GTO, when they move an inch, we move a mile. If they're under bluffing spots, then we just stop bluff catch, and it's not going to be comfortable. And but that's the correct response to make. That's the correct adjustment to make. If they're over bluffing spots, we're just calling down light all the time. And you'll, that's the way to respond to players deviating. So I think that Rob's right on the money there. If they're not bluffing enough, we shouldn't be bluff catching enough. And I think that's kind of like what Taylor's getting at here. Yeah, Taylor.
Yeah, and it's not always just about like folding and being super nitty and like going through those types of things, but the same type of deviations can, allow you to 3-bet more. And I think I've had a decent amount of examples where it was like, hey, like I've heard this person talk about how they view hands and making different comments. In the main, I heard someone make a comment after someone jammed for 20 big blinds. They jammed queen 10 suited, and the other person, it was a small blind versus button shove on the button, was like shocked that he would jam queen 10 suited. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, that's a totally fine solver play with 20 bigs. Like that's a great, 3-bet bluff type of candidate to have here. But then it, goes in my head. It's like, okay, well, this person isn't viewing 3-bet bluffs the same way. So their 3-bets are just going to be super strong and polar, that like little triangle when you look at a hand chart, and you can make adjustments for them. They're also probably going to overfold to your 3-bets because they're going to assume that you're doing the same thing to them. So get a strong ace or, an ace blocker and 3-bet them. So it's like a bunch of these like small different things. Like, so you can pick up on so many little things playing live. And then if you can take them and apply them in the right way, you can, increase the odds in your favor by when they give you that inch, you move a mile.
I love this, Taylor. I love that you're bringing this example up, because one of the things I think also this should just speak to our audience a little bit about is it is not really to your benefit, even if you think you know what you're saying and what you're talking about, to discuss strategy at the table. Because you are even if you're like talking about a hand that just happened, do you think you should have 3-bet there? And like you are giving away so much information to the people around you about what kind of hands you're playing, how much you understand about theory, what kinds of approaches and ranges you might approach your 3-betting with, your 3-bet calling range, all this kind of stuff. If people are actively listening and can sort of absorb that information, it's just not to your benefit. Just talk about other things. Talk about strategy away from the table, but don't talk about it with your opponents about, especially when when I see this the most is somebody busts, right? Somebody busts in a questionable way, and as they're walking away, they give them a little grace period before everyone starts. But then everyone starts being, like, how could you turn? And you're like, you're just giving away so much by having that conversation.
Yeah, that influences so much of like how I will make adjustments, is those types of chatter, those types of things. Like I listen to that and I try and pick up on as much of that as I can. And if anything, it just like helps you bucket people into like, what type of player are they? Like, are they talking about like, being balanced and what a solver might say and like things like that? Then it's like, okay, cool. Like I can put you into this bucket that you might be thinking GTO wizard, GTO ranges, how to handle specific spots. If you're just talking about like, hey, oh, I can't believe, they went with ace queen. That don't they know that's the parking lot hand? Okay, you're in a different bucket of mine. And it's so easy to just like start thinking about uh and bucketing people into specific player profiles and then making adjustments based off of that.
Yeah, ultimately, poker is about making better assumptions about your opponents than they're making about you. And if you're describing strategy at the table, usually what you're talking about is like the cusp hands, where something might be a this or it might be a that, it might be a call or it might be a raise. You're basically describing the edges of your ranges to the other players at the table. Like no one's ever like, oh, I can't believe you went all in with pocket aces there. It's like, oh yeah. No, everyone knows how to play pocket aces and everyone knows how to fold 2-7 offsuit. But if you start describing how you feel about the hands in the middle, those are the tough hands. Those are the hands that people that A are going to be harder for you to play, and B, now they're also most of the hands. And so you're kind of like telling your opponents which way you're moving an inch. And that helps them know which way to move a mile. Uh, so, gang, how do we? And I would say, like, still talk at the table. Talk about the weather, talk about books and music, and okay, not religion and not politics and not poker strategy, but those are the only three. Talk about how the room could do a better job accommodating women and new players. There's lots of good things to be talking about at the table. Um, gang, how do we know like when a player is moving an inch? Like, is it important that we know what the GTO line is so that we know which inch they're moving? Like, what are we looking for to make us understand, oh, we should move a mile in this direction or we should move a mile in this other direction, just based on what we're seeing from some of these, less experienced or less savvy players? Taylor.
I think there's a lot of things and you just have to be on the lookout for them. Like I feel like I'd miss a ton if I just start talking through it. But like some people, Chris talked about it before. We talked about my King Queen hand from the World Series of Poker on how many episodes, but it was like there's people that if check to will bet all the
Yeah.
time and will always take those. Okay, cool. Easy to find those, find them, target them, make a note of it. Cool. There's other people that only bet big when they have big hands. There's other people that just rarely bluff. They're like, if you just start watching hands play out, you can start to pinpoint some of those different things and understand what might be certain characteristics of someone. A common one is going to be people don't bluff. So when you see them, what I always think of as like acting out of line, not like, getting crazy with their plays, but like someone was previously betting and then they decided to step in and do the betting themselves. When they do that, how often do they have it? The answer is going to be a lot. So understand that, make that adjustment into your play. Like look at opportunities where when someone got stopped being aggressive and then the other persons took over the aggression, how often were they bluffing? The answer is going to be more likely in those spots. So just kind of pay attention to some of those dynamics. That's like, hey, if I take my foot off the gas and check to you, are you going to do the betting? And is that a good bluff catch spot for me? If I have my foot on the gas and you start betting into me, should I start making some hero folds? And, those types of things, just like paying attention to some of the dynamics at the table, I think is very important.
And a lot of this doesn't involve necessarily hands that get to showdown either. Like we can get a sense just from the frequency of passive or aggressive actions. And this is something that you will get better at by playing more. The more reps you get at the table, the more you will sort of intuitively understand the flow of the game and like who's supposed to do what, and then it'll become more clear to you when people break that rhythm, when people break that flow. That is something to sort of hold on to and comment on. Chris, I cut you off there.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to start in saying showdown is important, but the other elements are not. And I think one of the things to think about that's really hard, I think in the live game more than online, is that live hands can sometimes take 4-5 minutes, and it gets kind of like draining to just like be locked in the whole time. So I've gotten to a point where like I know if somebody's been tanking for a long time, I'm just like, okay, what was I just kind of rattle through what was the action? Because if I'm gonna see showdown here, I want to know, okay, there was a 3-bet in this hand. Well, what are the did they are what kind of, and there's like it's all Broadway cards on the board. So what is, and now they're folding what, and so like even if I don't see showdown there, I now know something about how the action has played out and what I would expect them to be doing with that range and what they might not have done. And so like I think showdown is the first step, if this is kind of like new to you in terms of like trying to notice how people are approaching the game. Well, somebody opened and then we got to see that they played 5-3 offsuit, right? They opened 5-3 offsuit from under the gun. That's really pertinent information for you down the road, right? But there's all this other stuff that you can start to gain and glean that where you don't even need to see showdown.
And so just pay attention. And I'm the worst at this. I'm on Twitter half the time when I'm playing live. I'm used to playing online where the computer tells me the pot size and everything, the amount I should bet and all this other stuff. But pay attention to the stuff like does one player just like instantly fold every time someone puts a bet out, no matter how big it is? Like, is it just like insta folding to small bets? Like, okay, that's something you can exploit. Is it someone that like Chris and Taylor were pointing out, like every time it checks around to them, they just bet because they like sense weakness, and so they're coming. There's lots of things you can pay attention to, but sizing would be one of them. That this isn't going to be showdown dependent, but like how people use small and large bets and how people respond to small and large bets will tell you something about their range. It'll tell you something about the way that they sort of think about the dynamics at the table. Yeah, we're always just trying to sort of put our opponents in a clear box, which is trying to make good assumptions about them because that's all we can do as poker. So it sounds like generally in the games that we're playing, our players aren't going to be bluffing at a high enough frequency. Some of them are probably going to be value betting either too thinly or not thinly enough. A lot of players are going to be inelastic to sizing. A lot of players are going to, we talked about this last week, they're going to base the size of their raise off the size of the bet, not off the size of the pot. Like there's lots of ways that people are going to indicate how they think about poker or what level they're on. And you just have to pay attention and make good assumptions about your opponents. And when they move an inch, we move a mile. Chris, Taylor, any other thoughts? Any other teases we want to? No, just pay attention and act accordingly. Easy. And you too can have these fantastic runs like Taylor Maas. And Taylor, thanks for mentioning that King Queen hand. So now that's officially been mentioned on like 5 episodes of the show or something like that. You couldn't have just let us go through 1 week without talking about the King Queen hand. Yes, you played in the World Series of Poker. You're such a baller. Jesus.
I'll bring it up in a few weeks. I'll let it have a little rest, and then we'll talk about it again. There'll be another interesting concept for us to dig into.
I'm already looking forward to it. Well, thank you to Taylor Maas, Chris Jones, Rob Washam, Rob Gardner, Kim Kilroy. Thank you to the Running Aces Hotel, Racetrack, and Casino for all their support. And for all you listening at home and for typing in the forums and the Discord and sharing your hands with us. Keep it up. We love it. And we love all of you. Have a great week. And thanks from us here at RecPoker.